This video is to help you with task 4 for the elementary handbook. Just like the other tasks, you want to make sure that you read the pages in the handbook that are associated with task 4. You also want to make sure that you check your specifications page towards the back of your handbook, because that will tell you what kinds of files you need and how to name them appropriately. You also want to make sure that you print out and look at any exemplars that are in your Blackboard course. Those are going to be really important to show you how you need to do this. And there are 3 rubrics for this task in your handbook that you want to make sure you look over so that you know exactly what they're looking for. Now, don't be overwhelmed by the number of parts that are in task 4. There are indeed 7 parts that you will submit, but some of these are a lot shorter than you've done in task 1, so don't worry too much. The first part that you're going to need is a context for learning information. Again, if this happens to be the same class as you did for your ELA, that's okay. You're still going to fill it out because you're going to address the learning needs that are different for math than ELA. If it's a different class, that's all right, if it's a different group of students. Part B is going to be your learning segment overview. So this is like lesson plans, but shortened. So you are going to plan a three segment lesson. Part C is going to be your formative assessment for math that you're choosing, and you're going to use this to evaluate how students do so you can reteach them, and we'll go more into that. Part D is going to be the actual evaluation criteria that you're using to tell whether they need more help or not. Part E is the work samples, just like you did in task 3. You're going to do student work samples, except this time for math. Part F is the examples of student work from the re-engagement lesson. So you're going to reteach them, and then you're going to turn in examples of their work to show how they got better. And then the last part is going to be your commentary, just like the other tasks, where you'll have to explain what you did. So the few things you want to work on right away, thankfully for this task, because you're not filming your students, you will not need to get a consent form to record them. However, if you teach more than one class, you want to make sure you still choose a focus class. And if you're working with a group instead of the entire class, then you're just going to pretend that that group is your whole class. And you're going to use that as your class for your lessons and for all of this information. Just like the other parts, you do need a minimum of at least 4 students, okay? And you're going to pull a small group later for reteaching, so you want to make sure that you definitely have those 4. You want to make sure you complete part A right away, the elementary mathematics context for learning. Again, this is no more than 4 pages, and it asks the exact same questions as your other prompt, as your other context for learning. Then lastly, you're going to plan a learning segment. This is going to be just like task 1, 3 to 5 consecutive lessons, except that they have to be math lessons, not ELA lessons. And these have to include the assessment that you're going to analyze for this task. So you can think of task 4 as sort of a shortened task 1, 2, and 3 all combined. And you're doing most of task 1 and task 3 for this. So you want to think about what you did for that, and you're going to do the same kind of thing here, where you need to come up with an assessment that matches your objective, and then you're going to analyze that later on. For task 4, your central focus is going to be a little bit different than it was for task 1. In this case, there are going to be 3 things that you need to have students show. You need to help develop their conceptual understanding. This means the ideas and rules that we use in math, right? That you know, anything that ends in a 0 is a multiple of 10, right? All of those rules that we have to teach, those ideas, that's your conceptual understanding. Then we also need students to have procedural fluency. And this is just the ability to do all of the steps efficiently and correctly. A lot of us have seen students where they get to a problem and all of a sudden they know what they're supposed to do, but they can't multiply 3 times 6. So you want to make sure that their procedural fluency, their ability to actually do the math steps, is enough, right? You want to check in with them about that and measure that. And then lastly, you need to show their mathematical reasoning and problem solving skills. This means that students cannot just be doing a worksheet of problems with you. They have to be doing something on their own where they have to solve a task, right? They have to actually figure out themselves how to solve something. They have to use problem-solving skills. So you want to think about what kind of project, what kind of larger assignment you can give them. And then for the analyzing student work portion, you're going to select one assessment, just like you did for task 3, that is from the 3 math lessons that you taught. And you're going to use this to evaluate and to analyze your students' knowledge and skills. And this has to be an assessment that everybody in the class did, right? The whole class did. And then you're going to analyze this and show how they needed help or how they did better. Okay. And again, if you're teaching only a group instead of the whole class, you just want to consider the group that you're working with as the whole class. Again, just like before, the assessment needs to reflect the work of individuals. So in other words, they can work on something in a group, but you can't assess them as a group. You still need to assess each person in that group on their individual work. So you want to make sure that even if students are working together, they're doing their own individual work. And then the assessment needs to show those 3 things that we just went over: the conceptual understanding, the computational and procedural fluency, and then the mathematical reasoning and problem-solving skills. You will also need to submit your evaluation criteria. Again, this is going to be a rubric or a checklist, and you want to make sure that your rubric or checklist lines up with your objective, with the standard, and with the 3 components of your central focus that you have to show. So you have to show those 3 things on your rubric. This is going to be the criteria that you use when you're evaluating students. And you need to also have a modified rubric or checklist for students with any kind of learning need. Again, this doesn't have to be IEP or 504 students. It can include those students, but it could also be a rubric for ELLs. It could be for students with math anxiety. It could be gifted students. It could be students struggling to read word problems. So you want to think about what specific learning needs you have in your class. And remember that this evaluation criteria, this is not a filled-in version. This is just the blank version. For this, you will also submit student work samples. They'll just be student work samples instead of ELA student work samples. So again, you're going to collect all of the work that your students do from this assessment, and then you're going to pick 3 student work samples that show some kind of pattern of learning. This could be what the students generally understood well. This could be what a group is still sort of having trouble with or struggling to understand. But you want to look for those patterns across your class and pick 3 student work samples. These are going to be your focus students, so also think about how one of them has a specific learning need. So once you have these, remember that you want to specify what learning need one of your focus students has in your commentary. You want to make sure that you talk about that and you tell the reviewers, because you are required to have some kind of learning need. And remember, this can be very, very general. This can be from a large number of categories. It does not have to be a student with an IEP or 504. It does not have to be a struggling student. Every class has students with specific learning needs. This could also include an SEL, a social emotional component that they're struggling with, such as math anxiety or reading anxiety, right? Or just a struggling reader in general. So you want to think about what student needs there are. And then the next part is going to be your examples of student work that are from your re-engagement lesson. So essentially what you're going to do is you are going to, after you've planned those 3 lessons and taught those 3 lessons, then you're going to identify a learning objective from the work samples, right? And a learning objective that you had that students did not meet. So that's why you want to analyze your student work samples and figure out what group of students are not getting something. And if they are getting everything, then you're probably teaching something too easy. So you want to make sure that you identify and come up with some new objective that is based on that analysis, and this is going to be for your re-engagement lesson. So if your students are struggling with fluency, right, and they don't have their multiplication facts down, your re-engagement lesson might be something like working on those multiplication facts. So you want to think about what are your students struggling with and what objective do you have for them to improve and be able to master this content. And then you're going to design that lesson, that re-engagement lesson, and it has to be based on this objective. So whatever you find that they're not able to do, that's what you're going to reteach. And you have to reteach it in a different way to just the students who are struggling. It's not necessarily going to be the whole class. It's going to be the students who are struggling. And it's important that you do it in a different way, because obviously if they could learn it the first time from what you taught before, they would have, right? So this is a chance to teach it in a different way, to clarify it in some way, break it down, and then you're actually going to teach this lesson. You do not have to record this lesson, but you do have to teach it. And again, it can be planned to teach the 3 focus students during one-on-one, during small group, during the whole class. It depends on what group needs this re-engagement lesson. Then once you've taught that lesson, you're going to collect and submit the 3 focus students' new work to EdTPA for your portfolio. This is going to be the new evidence of student mathematical understanding. So the idea is it has to show how have they learned something that they didn't know before, right? How have you done that re-engagement to really improve their learning? And these can be text files with scanned work. This can be oral assessments if they're young students, or it can be a video or an audio file. If you do an oral assessment, the oral assessment has to be given to all the students participating in the re-engagement lesson. So you want to make sure it's the same for all of them. And again, that doesn't have to be on the same day. They don't know when you're teaching this. You just have to have evidence of it. And then for each focus student, you have to have a work sample that is no more than 5 minutes in total. And then from this clip, you're going to evaluate the effectiveness of your re-engagement lesson and think about how it affects your student learning. Has it improved the student learning? Has it not? What would you change, right? Just the way you did task 3. And then the last part is your commentary. This is your mathematics assessment commentary. Again, go back to your handbook, reread the pages so that you know exactly what they're looking for in this. Your commentary should be 8 pages. You want to make sure that you write as much as you can, but not go over the page limit so that you know you have enough information and enough depth to satisfy what they're looking for. Remember, you have to write in the template between the brackets, and you're going to attach the assessment, including the prompts that were used to evaluate the student performance after the re-engagement lesson at the end, right? You're going to attach it just like you did in task 3 at the end. And this can be no more than 5 additional pages. So if it's longer than that, you have to choose which pages to upload. And remember that this assessment does not count towards your page count. Just some general things to remember. Make sure you respond specifically to the prompts and that you're answering the question that they're asking. If you find that you're repeating yourself over and over again, you probably haven't read the question carefully enough to know what they're looking for. The second thing is make sure you compare your work to the exemplar. Is it the same amount of length? Do you go into the same kind of detail, right? Are you up to that same amount of quality? You want to look for that. And then third, remember that it's okay if not all the kids did well. This is not an assessment like we have from administrators in school. This is a very different kind of assessment. They're looking to see if you can analyze your own teaching and if you can do something to make it better and to teach your students and understand where they are. So they're looking for you to be able to say what you would improve on and how your kids do not know everything yet, because if they knew everything, you wouldn't be a very effective teacher, because then you wouldn't actually be teaching them something. So it's okay if not all your kids do well. You're not being scored on how your students perform, right? You're being scored on your reflection of your teaching and your analysis of how they do. And then when all of the parts of your portfolio are complete for this task, you're going to reread the specifications page. That way you know that you've named all the files appropriately, that they're the right kind of file. You want to make sure that you look back at the rubrics in your handbook for this task to make sure that you have at least a 3 on each. 3 is passing, 2 is not. And if you're confused by the difference between the two, you can go to the rubric progression document. That one is really helpful for telling you what's needed to reach that 3 and what the difference is between a 2 and a 3. And then lastly, just make sure everything is complete. Remember that this is ultimately your license at stake and is your portfolio that you're responsible for completing. So good luck. We know you can do it.